Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today I have the distinct privilege of being in conversation with an internationally screened director, cinematographer, and editor. The stories she tells on screen are dynamic and seek to process and unearth raw emotion. Please welcome Katiana Weems. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it is so awesome to be here. I'm a big fan of the podcast. It's like such an honor to be on this. Like after so much time living in Baltimore, I'm like, oh wow, this is really cool.
Well, thank you. This is it's really cool to meet new people and have them share their work. And yeah, we're gonna get into it. So before we get too deep, I got to start off with that sort of de facto, tell me about yourself question. But I like to do it a little differently. Like some people will say, depends on where you want me to start in the story. But share your story with us. Where'd you grow up? Describe your sort of creative background, and I got another bullet point, but that's enough to start off with. So the floor is yours on that piece.
All right, I'm on it. So I grew up in Howard County in Ellicott City, little county kid, and I just loved making movies. I think from a really young age. I had one of my first cameras was this Barbie like DVD or I guess VHS camera where you had to like press record on the little TV, and then the camcorder would start recording. Like I don't even really remember how it worked, but I'd make my dad and my brother and my stuffed animals. Like I'd write little scripts and make them all perform in it. Then like when the flip camera came out, like that stupid little rectangle thing that everybody had for like a year. I'd do little movies with my friends and for school projects. And then I think it really took me until high school to really take it seriously as an art form. I was a big music and theater kid. I was in a lot of theater productions. My dad's a musician, so he'd always have me like practicing every night, all those hours. But I had performance anxiety, and I don't think really ever liked being in front of the screen, being the center of attention. But I really liked making things that were beautiful and interesting and meaningful. And I really found that I was able to combine a lot of my talents together through filmmaking. And then in high school, I did this big year-long, or I guess 2-year-long study on cinema and all of its different forms. It was like sort of a creative class where you got to cobble together all of your interests and do a year-long study on something specific that you were interested in. And I just took that class 2 years in a row and did it on film twice.
Seems a little like cheating, though. Seems a little bit.
I was like, let me pick 2 different film projects to do.
That's great.
And then when college rolled around, I really wanted to go to Syracuse. I had my eyes and my heart set on it. And my parents said, okay, well, you can go to an in-state school and we will pay for that. Or you can go to community college for 2 years and we'll pay for that. And then we can figure out how we're going to pay for Syracuse. And that's the route I decided to take. I got my film history, or I guess film studies associates at Howard Community College. Go Dragons. Which I think ended up being a really, really great decision for me in the long run. I really pushed community college for a lot of my high schoolers, especially those that are vaguely sure about what they want to do or really have their heart set on a college that's just going to be, I think, too expensive to afford just out of pocket. And then I ended up going to Syracuse and studying in Prague for a little bit. I studied 35 millimeter out there, came back, finished up my degree at Syracuse, and still loved filmmaking as much as I did as a 10-year-old running around with her Barbie VHS camera. And decided that what I really, really liked doing was filmmaking and teaching film. So I interviewed for a job at Baltimore School for the Arts, like the fall, I want to say, of my senior year. And they said, okay, well, we'll check back in with you when you graduate. We'll see where we're at. We'll see if we have a position open for you. And I've been there for 3 years now. And I've gotten to freelance because it's all the positions at Baltimore School for the Arts for arts teachers are, you're sort of like an adjunct. So you come and teach your classes, and then the rest of the time you're free to be a working artist and working on your craft. So it's been a fun and long road to get here, but have enjoyed literally every second of it.
That's great. And thank you for walking us through that. It's interesting hearing like how like some of those like early on moments, like I was joking about it recently about I had this tape recorder and I was in high school and I was like, so embarrassing. I was doing the thing like The Rock. I was speaking in the third person and then putting a mic in front of people. And I was like, oh, this is so cringe. I hope I never find those tapes. A little bit I want to find them because I'm like, oh man, I am terrible. But also I'm like, this might work itself into a podcast somehow.
I hope you do find those tapes.
There,
I'd like to hear those tapes.
Shout out to City College. Some of those early on things is like, yo. So in freelancing and in picking up projects and working on projects, what was one of the first ones that you worked on, whether it was something that was your own project, whether it was something where you were doing a more collaborative thing? Describe like that first project, that first sort of media job.
My first project, at least post grad, from my bachelor's, kind of fell into my lap a little bit.
Sure.
It's such a crazy story about how this happened. I'm still like, did this really happen? I was stuck in Syracuse because it was the middle of the pandemic. It was 2020. And so much was going on, I think, but in my personal life. And then so much was just going on politically in the world and socially in the world. And I think the one thing that I was really trying to push to keep me going is I was working on my thesis. I was working on 111 at the time and finishing it up. And then I was also, just to keep my sanity, like posting shorter films that I was making in my house during quarantine, like shot on my camcorder. Like an old camcorder that I had found of mine that was at my parents' house, and I think brought up with me probably sometime when I came home for break in college, and I just found it in my stuff, and I said, I remember having this. And so I wrote little scripted films that I would just try and do with just me and one other person. And I posted one on my Instagram, I want to say. And then I want to say a couple days later, maybe like a week or so later, Kimber Sprawl, who is an actress, she's a Broadway actress. I think she was in The Lion King at the time, messaged me and said that she was working on this piece that involved a lot of Broadway actors. And she loved the piece that I had just posted, it was Minnows. And she was wondering if I would be interested in being their editor. And I said, this isn't real. I'm like, someone's literally pranking me right now. I'm like, how did you even find me? But I said, yes, I would love to. I like stalked her Instagram. I was like, this isn't real. I was like, let me double check to make sure.
What bot is this?
Yeah, I was like, somebody's messing with me. Like someone's punking me. But I was like, okay, well, I guess if someone's punking me, I guess I'll write it out. So I said, yes, I'd love to. Then it took about, I want to say around a couple weeks to hear back from her. But she messaged me back and she said, so the project's gotten much bigger. We have money to pay you now. It's now backed by the Public Theater, which I was like, what? She said, yeah, and we're looking to get all these different actors in. And so she started sending me some of the footage, and I started looking through the people in the footage, and I was like, okay, so that's Audra McDonald, like that's Don Cheadle. I was like, what is
like, you're in a Marvel movie. I know who you are.
I know. I was like, what is happening right now? And I'd be in these calls like with these people like that worked at the Public Theater and worked with all these like incredible actors over the years and all these incredible productions over the years. And I was like crazy imposter syndrome. I was like, I feel like I should not be here. But the process of, sorry, my dog is just all over me right now. But the process of working on it was so special. Because it was all of these actors. The project is called To Be Black, and it was all of these Black actors that came together to do the To Be or Not to Be soliloquy. Yeah. And we juxtaposed it with a lot of footage from the 2020 protests. And I had this interesting idea of pulling in archival footage also, just because there wasn't a ton of clarity yet around licensing for taking footage that people had taken of those protests, just because it was so fresh and so new.
Sure.
And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure we can find a lot of open source footage of like older protests from back in the day. And I think it'd be interesting to play around with those two things and see what kinds of images that we can conjure up in people's heads, what kind of emotions that we can play with. To sort of contrast that sort of new visual theater or virtual theater thing that people were playing with during the pandemic that I think has since gone away. But it was such an interesting space to be in. Like, it was like this towing the line between theater and film, and like, what is the difference between those two things and how we do this now virtually on a 2D plane. I wish we hadn't dropped that so quickly after the pandemic, but I think everybody's just been so ready to get things back to quote unquote normal that I think it's a media form that has just since been, I think, put down. But that was, I think, the first big project that I was on. The New York Times included it in a piece that they wrote about virtual theater in 2020. And it was just like so surreal that that was my first project that I was contracted to do post-grad. And I was like, wow, did I peak? Oops.
That's funny. That's funny. That's amazing. Yeah, I think every now and again, when some of those opportunities happen, like especially on the socials, because everything is so sketchy, it's like, oh, okay. Like, I'm surprised sometimes because I've been asking, obviously I'm going out, reaching out to people, seeing who would be interested in, people want to take a peek into what the process looks like. And it's like, how do you get this person? How do you get that person? And it's like, sometimes I just ask and I'm very surprised when they hit me back and say, yes, I'll do this. I have one person that I'm talking to soon who's he's the founder of a huge art magazine. And I'm like, I don't know how I got him. And I actually talked with him on the phone. I was like, oh, you are a real person. It's like, hey, bro, you gonna put me in your thing? This is great. And you almost want to pinch yourself. Like, is this real? So yeah, I definitely get it.
That's so crazy to hear you have those thoughts too, because I feel like, I feel like I was like, oh my gosh, like Rob Lee wants to talk to me.
So is there an experience, like a film experience, like one you were watching, one that you like were aware of, you wanted to really get into the nuts and bolts of the process that really like gave you that spark? Because you touched on like being very young when you had the Barbie cam, getting that. So tell me about like, one of those, like, was it a movie? Was it, watching something? Because I'll say one of the very early experiences for me was, remember, I think I was 8. And my dad was like, yo, they filming a movie across the street. And it was for Meteor Man. And I've done 2 screenings for Meteor Man since. And, it was a black superhero movie that was filmed in the middle of Baltimore. And I'm like, when I think of movies, and when I think of every now and again when I romanticize about, I would like to be a filmmaker, I think about that. That's my point. So what is like a movie for you, an experience for you that was like, you know what, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to make movies.
I mean, I feel like I can look back to so many little experiences. I don't know if I can pinpoint a singular starting point, but I do remember a lot of the checkpoints for me.
Sure.
I want to say, I mean, we always used to watch we'd have family movie nights. Very, very nuclear of us, but we'd have family movie nights. It's usually like on a Friday night, a Saturday night. We'd all gather around the TV, and my dad would fast forward through inappropriate parts and go, oh my gosh, oh, what is this? Oh. And we'd be like, Dad, come on. So it would continue until we were like 18. We were like, are you serious? Like, you're the only one that cares at this point.
This is just so much cheese and crackers.
Exactly. It'd be like they'd be kissing and he'd be fast forwarding.
It's a little too much tongue there. I'm moving ahead.
But I want to say we watched Moonrise Kingdom. Yeah, it was Moonrise Kingdom. It had to have been at least past middle school because the basement was finished. And I remember we watched it in the basement. I remember watching Moonrise Kingdom. It was my first Wes Anderson movie that I had ever seen. I think after Fantastic Mr. Fox, but Fantastic Mr. Fox, I feel like I don't really count for me because it's stop motion, and I always liked stop motion. I saw Moonrise Kingdom and I was like, whoa. I was like, this is cool. Um, and then I can remember the next checkpoint for me was in high school, when I watched The 400 Blows for the first time. Francois Truffaut, still to this day, one of my favorite movies. I think, in my opinion, one of the best coming of age films of all time. It's so gorgeous, so tender, so interesting, and such a benchmark of the French New Wave, which I think was a real me. I think discovering the French New Wave and learning about it was a real turning point for me in the definition of my style as a filmmaker,
Sure.
and about how I think about my methodologies and the way that I approach cinema, or I guess the creation of cinema in general. I just think it's so beautiful what they were doing and what they were able to accomplish. It's such an interesting time in the world. This was like the 60s. And also just such an interesting time for technology because everything was getting lighter and smaller and everything was so much more accessible. I think in a lot of different ways, it really mirrors the time period now, what they were doing then. I think a lot of people will reference like New Hollywood as like a sort of revival of the French New Wave, but like I'm seeing it a lot now, especially like with how rapidly technology is advancing and like these smaller and smaller and smaller cameras. That are getting like less and less expensive for people to be able to use and make things with. So I think the 400 Blows was a big one for me. And then for me, I think personally as a filmmaker, like for my soul, when 13th came out, I mean, it's a big one. Ava DuVernay, I think blowing up and appearing on the scene was just, I think, monumental for me. I hadn't seen Pariah is her, right? I'm pretty sure Pariah is her. But I hadn't seen Pariah yet at the time. 13th was my first Ava DuVernay. And I just remember being so in awe that like this woman, like this prominent Black director was like making something that was so huge and so revered. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then I went back and did my research and discovered, you know, Julie Dash and Yuzan Palsy and all the big greats that came before her. But 13th and the 400 Blows, I think, were the two big ones that really defined my style as a filmmaker.
See, you're an overachiever because you answered two questions in that one. So shout out to you on that. And thank you. Yeah. I think when you're talking to someone who's in film, I was hearing all the film nerd things that I really love to hear. It's like, that's the French New Wave. I was like, she said it. she said the thing. As we're kind of talking about like how your style is defined and what you take into it and what comes from, you know, other filmmakers, and I think that's important where, you know, people. I read this book called Steal Like an Artist, and people rarely talk about like, who do you steal from? It's like kind of, you know, podcast is just theft, and it's like I have a way of going about questions. And I had one buddy who was like, you're kind of Nardwuar, but then also you're a little more like this person. I was like, look, I find random questions. I like to look at it like the dude from Hot Ones sans the wings.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about a project, what are some of the questions like within the process? What are some of the questions that you're asking, you're looking to maybe have understanding, or what are you looking for in a story that you want to tell?
I think overall, the first thing that I am looking for is something that feels real, which I know is very nebulous. But I have a lot of trust in my audience. I think that was one of the big things that I learned from a lot of my mentors over the years, is to really trust your audience. Because if you've curated like a certain style over time, like the people that stick with you, like they'll understand what you're trying to do. You don't have to spoon feed it to them. So it's just is to discover and to evoke an emotion within people that feels real. Um, there is this really, really lovely quote. I think it's a Godard quote. I want to say it's a Godard quote, where he says, "Cinema is the most beautiful fraud in the world."
That's a good quote.
Um, and I have really been, I think over the years, I've really struggled with being able to agree or disagree with that. And I've ping ponged back and forth for years. Honestly, I think I'll die and I still won't know whether I agree or disagree with that. Um, because yes, you're creating these expansive worlds that do not exist. You are playing with emotions and people and characters that do not exist. You're moving things around in this fantasy space that you've allowed people to watch on this 2D plane, but essentially the thing that you've created doesn't really exist. But is it really a fraud if what the thing is doing, the emotions that it's invoking, the effect of that piece of art that you've created is something that is true for people?
One of the things that the thought that popped in my head right there, I'm a nerd when it comes to wrestling, right? I'm a big wrestling nerd. And
real wrestling or WWE? Because I love WWE.
WWE, yes, WWE indeed. And they talk about it being theater. They talk about like some of these emotions that are elicited. And it's like, I can pop the audience. I can, have them in my hand or what have you, just with a few words. And people always think it's weird when someone that does that for a living, that can emote, that can elicit a certain feeling, maybe navigates towards acting. It's like it seems like it's a logical step. It's less physical, I guess. And I even look at this. I did an interview a while ago with this podcaster, and he teaches a podcast. He's a journalist. And he was like, this whole thing is contrived. He's like, you know that, right? He's like, and I was like, yeah, it is. Like, this is a conversation that we plan to have at a certain time. And there's some semblance of questions. It's not like, hey, let me put on a microphone real quick. We got to talk, while we record this. So there's some sense of understanding. And it's like, but I don't want to feel like I'm doing something that feels contrived. So I kind of ping pong a little bit about, all right, am I getting caught on the word, or what is the intent here in this sort of thought when how I'm perceiving this medium?
Yeah, I love that. I am a big fan of, I feel like WWE, my love for WWE as a child, I think really goes hand in hand with my love for reality TV these days. Because it's so interesting to me. I always tell my partner, and I always talk about this. He thinks it's so funny, but I'm either caught watching like reality TV or like the worst of the, like I want bad movies or something that's like really pretentious, and there's no in between.
That's really funny.
But what I find so interesting and so like just captivating about reality television is this idea of like performed reality, because like at the end of the day, like you're not going to capture reality. Documentaries aren't reality either. Even the most verite of cinema verite documentaries are still going to be some sort of staged or performed, because just by nature of surveillance, like people are going to understand and know when they're on camera and act a different way accordingly. People are telling stories for people all the time, watched or not. So it's that interesting aspect of like performed reality. Like, is anything that we're doing actually real?
I agree with it, where you see these different videos, you see people who are doing interviews. I was like, yeah, here's the real thing. Is it though? I don't know. I don't know. Like, whether there is, because I remember they would talk about on reality shows back in the day of there's, drama in the house. We need to have an accelerant. We need to have some booze or something in there. It's like, yeah, this is leading up to this. It's massaging the situation. And the backside of it, the person that should be getting paid the most in these scenarios is the editor, because real life is not that interesting. And then this happened.
I have always wanted to edit for reality television, just once.
I mean, I'm looking at doing a reality show. We might have to talk about this.
We might have to talk about this.
So I got a couple more real questions for you before I get to those rapid fire ones. So let's talk about so you have the filmmaking background, and that is huge, and you've also touched on earlier just being in this sort of adjunct role and being an educator. So tell me, what do you enjoy most about teaching, like cinematography, teaching lighting and workshops in that sort of space? Because I mean, doing and teaching, they can feel very different at times. So tell me about that.
Um, how much time do we have? I truly never know where to start with this question. I love teaching. I love my students. I mean, I struggle to find one thing that I don't like about it. Maybe the pay. Yeah, I think that's probably the one thing. Because aside from that, everything else is just, I think that teaching is something that I've just always wanted to do also, just like right there next to filmmaking. Like when I was a kid, I had this little school set situation. And one of my teachers retired when I was in second grade and handed us all of her old worksheets. And I used to make my brother sit down and like do those. I'd be like, Dirk, you have to do this worksheet, this math worksheet, and I'll grade it. And then I'd give it to like our stuffed animals and make them do the worksheets too.
Amazing.
Professors of mine would have me TA as a senior, and then after I graduated, even though I wasn't a grad student there anymore, just because I had such a passion for sharing information. I think that's probably what it is about it that I enjoy the most. Is it both allows me to share what I have learned over time, and I love that look in people's eyes that they get, especially in my students' eyes, that they get when something finally clicks for them. Mm-hmm. And when I'm able to, because everybody's able to understand, like I believe in the whole like left brain, right brain thing, but I think a lot of it really has to do with your learning style and how best people teach to your learning style. And it brings me a lot of joy to be able to figure out what each of my students' specific learning styles is and deliver a piece of information to them, maybe about cinematography that they hadn't understood before, like the really technical aspects, or a creative aspect that they hadn't really understood before, and deliver it to them in such a way that they're like, oh my gosh, wait, I get it now. And seeing that growth of their work over time is just such there is little that compares to how incredibly special that feels, that you get to be a part of that process for someone. It's like such an incredible honor that I get to be even a part of that creative process and that growth process at all. And it also really allows me to strengthen my own knowledge. Yeah. About things, because I do so much prep for lessons, because I'll be like, oh my gosh, like, wouldn't it be so interesting if I used, I don't know, like sometimes we'll play like a game at like a party, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, wait, this would be such an interesting teaching tool. Maybe I'll use this as a lesson, and then I'll completely restructure my lesson for the next class. Because I'm like, wait, I think they'll really get it if I like put this here, and then I show this film at the end of class, and then we wrap it up with this. And then also it's just really special to then get to take them out for practical real life experiences, because I'm a teaching artist. Like this weekend, I had all of my students on set. Not all of them, but a good number of them, like 12 of them, I think, came out to come help us that weekend. And they got to like actually help be PAs, be camera assistants. So there's little to nothing that I do not like about teaching is the shortest answer I can give.
No, that's great. And I like that opportunity to give the students sort of this hands-on, like, this is what this can look like. Because, there's a certain sense of, theory, and then there's a certain like in class sort of application. And then there's like the real practical, like, what, this camera might not work or whatever.
Mhm.
You might forget, like, I know that firsthand because I might forget my storage device or I might not
Mhm.
have the assets that are really going to do this. So what I'm going to do, go to a store to get it? Am I going to MacGyver this situation? What does that look like? And
Mhm.
yeah, I think it, gives folks like a real like temperature check.
Mhm.
So this is the real question, the last real question I have for you. And this is about some of the more recent things over the last like year or so, Sondheim, Saul Zaentz. So tell me about like being in that sort of conversation and being a finalist and being like a fellow, and what's that experience been like? Because I see you when I type in your name, it's just this award, that award, this finalist, this fellow. So tell me about what that's been, as you've like developed as a filmmaker and has developed in this sort of like being a known commodity, if you will.
I talk to a lot of my mentors very often. And I think the main piece of advice that they always give me is that I need to slow down. Because I think I realized recently, my partner and I are planning on moving soon, but I'm already focused on like, okay, well, where are we gonna, like, where's that house gonna be finally? Like, what's that gonna look like? Where are we gonna be then? And I'm not even focused on the next step anymore. I'm focused on like 3 steps from now. And so I say all of that to say, I don't think I've taken the proper time to appreciate that yet. Because I'm so focused on the fact that I feel like I'm not doing enough at all times. I feel like I haven't achieved enough. I haven't gotten to work on that film that I've been wanting to work on for a year. There's just so much I'm so focused on that I am not doing yet or haven't been able to have the chance to do yet, that I haven't really been able to focus on the recent successes. But feeling them in the moment, I mean, I mean, it makes me emotional. Like walking through the Sondheim show, and getting to see my piece on in the corner and getting to talk to all the incredible artists that I was screening with. Like I made so many like acquaintances and friends just out of that experience. We got to meet so many incredible artists in Baltimore, because Baltimore is, I mean, but there's so many incredible artists here. It's like baffling to me. I'm always so excited when I get to meet a new person that I really admire. And I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, I really liked you for a long time. Which is funny because, I mean, Baltimore, everybody knows everybody somehow. You just have to find that one person that
Just gotta look for it.
Yeah, but the Sondheim Prize was so incredible. The semifinalist show was just crazy. Getting to meet, I think Travis was a real highlight for me, Travis Sylvester. Because we were also together at the Saul Zaentz Fund this year. And I was like, oh, hey, how'd your de-install go? And getting to hear about his idea for what he was pitching for the Saul Zaentz Fund, it's just really, really cool. I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't know how much he is sharing right now, but it's a really interesting project. It's a series.
It's going to be really interesting because I'm interviewing him tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you can tell me talk about it.
Like, hey, Trav, what it is. we found out, like you said, Baltimore, we found out we have a mutual situation. And I was like, oh, this is going to be even more interesting now. And so hold on. So it was one thing that you said that's very similar to me. So I got to ask, are you an air sign, an Aquarius? What is your thing?
Oh, I'm a Taurus. An earth sign.
Close enough.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to stop and smell the roses either. Like I'm like, people are like, wow, you did 400. I was like, I'm coming up on 500 interviews. I've not celebrated any of them. No milestones have been touched. Did the creative mornings. You got the best of Baltimore. It's like, what's next? I guess I'll have a donut. I don't know. And I'm just working on this series. Like I'm doing a spinoff in Philadelphia. And it's kind of there. And when I did the creative mornings talk the other day, the last 2 questions or comments that were said was like, so when are you taking a break? And I was like, wow, is that out there? I was like, y'all don't know me. I'm nodding off in the chair in front of them. So
You said, what is a break?
yeah, breaks. The only thing I break is fast. That was very black. So with that, I want to dive into the rapid fire portion of this conversation. So brevity is key. You know how this works. Summer or winter, and
Summer. Oh.
That's great.
Sorry.
That's great.
You said
so, but with it, and I think you already. So, which one do you prefer for work? Which one do you prefer for play?
Okay. Summer and summer.
Thank you. I knew it was going to be that. I was just waiting for it. Heavy Taurus energy. What is your favorite number and why?
I don't know. 7 just popped into my head. I don't know why.
That's a number of chaos, by the way.
Oh, well, that's good. So maybe that's why.
Numerology.
7. Oh, well, my dog is 7. So how about that? That's why it's 7.
Okay. It's also a Prince song. Also the number that Carmelo Anthony wore. Also, no, just going to go down the list. Are you an optimist or a realist? Which one do you align closer to?
I think I'm a realist.
Very Taurus. How many movies do you own? And I know that we're in a streaming age, but it's something about when you actually own the physical thing. It's something different about that. Like I own probably a couple hundred, but it used to be closer to 1,000. And breakups, you don't get all your stuff back. So yeah, it's funny how I put that actually. So I'm glad I started collecting vinyl since I was away. I don't know.
I have no idea. Not very many, honestly. A lot of them are at my parents' house. I want to say, if I had to guess, like under 30.
Okay. Okay, this is a ridiculous question. And it was me writing down something stupid when you said left brain, right brain, and I wrote down left Twix or right Twix.
Left Twix.
Thank you. You answered the question. You answered all of them right. I mean, that's literally a throwaway question. That's such a dumb question, but also
it's a good question.
Yeah. So actually, I feel like I need to put a real question in there, a real rapid fire question. Favorite type of cuisine? I feel like sushi might be a thing for you.
I'm like sitting between Korean or Japanese.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's good.
I'm a vegetarian, so it's easier.
This is true. Yeah, my partner is a pescatarian, so I was like, all right, I hope I get to kill a fish here. So with that, that's kind of it. We got to learn a little bit about your work. We got to learn a little bit about the play, a little bit about, you enjoying Korean or Japanese. So now this is that part of the afternoon where shameless plugs. So I want to thank you for being on this podcast. And I want you to share anything that you're working on, any website, social media, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Wow, I'm so bad at shameless plugs. I'm just awkward about it.
Aren't we all?
Well, let me think about that. There's 2 projects that should be coming out soon, but I don't know when they're coming out. I was the DP for them, but I think it's more of a director question as to when they're coming out. But I do know that BSA's The Nutcracker, the making of, is going to be out soon in December. Whoop whoop, MPT.
Nice.
There's going to be a very awkward interview with me beforehand. I feel like I'm really not good on camera. This is at least a little bit easier because no one has to see my face.
Oh, I'm absolutely putting this out as the video. This whole thing.
No.
It's just an X over both of our faces.
I feel like I'm very awkward on camera. This is easier because it's Zoom. There's no cameras around. I'm not worried about where the lights are. But it'll be out in December on MPT. Some of my students were very eloquently also interviewed, so you'll have those to look forward to before the piece airs. And other than that, you can follow me on my socials. It's Katiana.Jasmine. It's my Instagram. My website is kjweems.com. Super easy to remember. And that's about it. You can contact me through either.
Well, thank you. And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Katiana Weems for coming onto the podcast and chopping it up with me. And for Katiana Weems, I'm Rob Lee, saying that there is art, culture, filmmakers, educators, all of that good stuff in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.